Listen to me very carefully. If you're treating every line of credit, every loan, every financing agreement the same, if you're making blanket payments across your entire debt portfolio without a strategy, you are leaving millions on the table. I'm not exaggerating. In my 3 decades managing 9-figure portfolios, sitting on boards of Fortune 500 companies, and evaluating thousands of private equity deals, I've watched high-income professionals destroy generational wealth because no one explained the fundamentals of capital allocation. Here's the deal. Not all liabilities are created equal. Some financing instruments, I'm talking about sub 4% fixed rate mortgages on appreciating real estate assets, or 2.9% APR luxury vehicle financing on a Porsche 911 or Tesla Model S. Those are actually wealth accelerators when managed correctly. Meanwhile, other liabilities quietly drain your net worth every single month, like high interest credit facilities or revolving consumer debt. And I guarantee you, most high earners watching this right now are misallocating capital by aggressively paying down the wrong liabilities first. I've been saying this for years on CNBC, at Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meetings, in boardrooms with private banking clients managing $50 million plus AUM. Today, I'm going to show you exactly which 3 types of low-cost, tax-advantaged debt you need to stop overpaying immediately, and where ultra-high net worth individuals redirect that cash flow instead. This one capital deployment strategy is the same framework I use across my real estate holdings in Manhattan and Miami, my classic car collection, we're talking Ferrari, Lamborghini, limited run Aston Martin, and my dividend growth investment portfolio that generates 6 figures in passive income quarterly. Let me tell you something about myself. I didn't inherit a trust fund. I built my net worth from zero, scaling SaaS enterprises, acquiring cash flowing commercial real estate, and structuring private credit deals. My investment accounts now spin off substantial passive income every single year through S&P 500 index funds, municipal bonds, and high yield savings vehicles. I made every capital allocation mistake you could imagine early in my career, and I documented every single one of them. The biggest lesson, understanding the true cost of capital versus the return on invested capital. See, most people think debt is just debt. They lump their 3.25% jumbo mortgage on their primary residence in Austin, their 1.9% financing on their Range Rover autobiography, their premium travel rewards, credit cards, their MBA student loans, all into one ugly pile, and they throw money at whatever feels most urgent or whatever their CPA told them to pay off first back in 1998. That approach is financial suicide in slow motion for anyone with a 6-figure income. I'm going to tell you the truth today, and some of you aren't going to like it. Some of you are going to say, Kevin, that goes against everything my private wealth manager told me. Good, because what you've been taught is keeping you from your first $10 million. Today, I'm covering 5 critical points about strategic leverage that most retail financial advisors either don't understand or won't tell you because it doesn't sell their fee-based AUM products. We're going to talk about the 3 specific types of low-interest, asset-backed debt you should stop aggressively paying down, the ROI mathematics behind why this capital deployment strategy works, and exactly where accredited investors should be parking the money you're currently wasting on unnecessary principal reduction. By the end of this video, you're going to have a completely different understanding of how capital markets work. You're going to see leverage the way billionaires, hedge fund managers, and real estate moguls see it, not as a liability, but as a strategic tool for acquiring appreciating assets like blue chip equities, investment properties, and luxury collectibles. And you're going to have a clear action plan to restructure your balance sheet starting today. I've used these exact principles to build my own wealth. I practice what I preach. My portfolio, my holding companies, my private equity allocations, it all revolves around understanding the true cost of capital and deploying money where it generates the highest risk-adjusted return. So stop what you're doing, pay attention, take notes if you have to, because what I'm about to share with you could be worth $500,000 to $2 million over your lifetime. Maybe more if you're in the top 5% of earners. Let's get into it. Here's the first liability you need to stop throwing extra money at: your low interest fixed rate mortgage on prime real estate. And I can already hear people screaming at their screens. Kevin, my family office told me to be debt free and pay off my house as fast as possible. I don't care what your family office told you. Your family office didn't run the mathematics of wealth compounding against 2026 inflation data. Let me be crystal clear about this. If you locked in a mortgage rate anywhere between 2.5% and 4% over the last decade on your primary residence or investment property, that is some of the cheapest institutional money you will ever have access to in your entire life. Throwing extra payments at that debt is one of the worst capital allocation decisions you can make as an accredited investor. You want to know what I do? I never pay a single dollar more than I have to on low interest, tax deductible debt, not $1. And here's why. The S&P 500 has returned an average of roughly 10% annually over the long term. Premium commercial real estate in growth markets like Tampa, Charlotte, and Phoenix has delivered 8 to 12% IRR. Even high-yield corporate bonds and dividend aristocrats are yielding 4 to 6% right now. So let's do the math together, because this is critical for anyone managing a seven-figure portfolio. If you have a 3.5% mortgage on your $1.2 million property and you throw an extra $2,000 a month at it, you're essentially earning a 3.5% return on that money by avoiding future interest.
But if you take that same $2,000 and invest it in a diversified portfolio, VOSGD, commercial REITs, or even a high-yield savings account at 4.8%, historically, you're looking at 7 to 10% returns.
That's a 3.5% to 6.5% arbitrage spread. Over 20 years, we're talking about $1.3 million to $2.1 million you left on the table due to inefficient capital deployment. I've seen this destroy portfolios. I've watched executives with $400,000 salaries sacrifice their retirement security because they were obsessed with paying off their luxury home in Scottsdale. They'd walk around saying, "I'm debt-free," while their neighbors who understood leverage were acquiring rental properties, investing in private credit funds, and building real wealth through asset accumulation. Now, let me be specific about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying take out more mortgage debt to buy a McLaren or speculate on crypto. I'm not saying be irresponsible. I'm saying if you already have a low interest mortgage locked in on an appreciating asset, stop making extra principal payments and redirect that money into investments that generate higher returns. Here's the action step. Look at your mortgage rate right now. If it's under 5%, stop all extra payments today. Take that money, every dollar of it, and open a brokerage account if you don't have one with Fidelity, Schwab, or JP Morgan Private Bank. Put it into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund like VOO or SPY, or allocate to dividend ETFs like SSGD. Set up automatic deposits and forget it. Let compound interest do what compound interest does. The wealthy understand that cheap debt is a tool. It's leverage. When you can borrow money at 3.5% and invest it to earn 10%, you're making money on the spread. That's how the top 1% get richer. That's exactly what I do across my real estate and equity positions. And here's what nobody tells you: you still have the cash. If something catastrophic happens, if you lose your executive position, if the market corrects 20%, if you need capital for a private equity opportunity, you have liquidity, you have options. The person who threw all their extra money at the mortgage, they have equity trapped in a house they might not be able to access without selling or taking out a new HELOC at 2026 rates. Liquidity is oxygen for your financial life. Never forget that. Number two, and this is going to be controversial with traditional wealth advisors, stop aggressively paying down your federal student loans. I'm not talking about private student loans at 11% variable rates. Those are a different asset class entirely. I'm talking specifically about federal student loans with fixed interest rates, especially if you lock them in before the Fed rate hikes. We're talking 4% to 6.8% on graduate degrees, MBAs, law school, or medical school debt. You know what makes me crazy as someone who sits on investment committees? I see young professionals in their 20s and 30s, software engineers at Google, making $280,000. Management consultants at McKinsey, investment banking, analysts throwing every spare dollar at their student loans while they have $0 in their brokerage accounts, zero exposure to VUO, zero positions at a CE, zero equity in rental properties. They're so focused on being debt-free that they're missing the most valuable wealth-building years of their lives, and that's a seven-figure mistake. Let me tell you something about compound interest, and this is essential for anyone managing a high income. The money you invest in your 20s is worth dramatically more than money you invest in your 40s because of time in the market. We're talking about decades of additional compounding on equities, REITs, and dividend reinvestment. Every $1,000 you invest at age 25 could be worth $17,000 to $20,000 by retirement at historical S&P 500 returns. But if you wait until you're 45 to start investing because you were obsessed with paying off student loans at 5.5%, that same $1,000 might only grow to $4,000 or $5,000. That's the opportunity cost of capital misallocation, and it's brutal. Here's the deal. Most federal student loans have interest rates between 4% and 7%. That's not cheap, but it's also not the emergency that Dave Ramsey-style personal finance gurus treat it as for high earners. Meanwhile, your employer at Goldman Sachs, Apple, or Amazon might be offering a 401k match that you're not taking advantage of. That's free money. That's an I. And Stanton 50% or 100% return, depending on the match structure. No hedge fund on Wall Street can guarantee that, and you're leaving it on the table to pay off a 5% loan. I don't care what the personal finance blogs tell you. The math doesn't lie, and institutional investors live by the math. Here's what I recommend for accredited investors and high-income W-2 earners. Make your minimum required payments on federal student loans. Never miss a payment. Your credit score matters when you go to finance commercial real estate, secure Porsche Financial Services lease on a 911 Turbo S, or apply for a JP Morgan Reserve card. But take every extra dollar you are going to throw at those loans and do this instead. First, max out your employer's 401k match. Every single dollar. If your company matches 6% of your $300,000 salary, that's $18,000 in free capital annually, plus another $18,000 match. That's $36,000 deployed before you even consider your own contributions. This is an immediate guaranteed return that beats any debt payoff under 50% interest. Second, build an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And I don't mean in a 0.01% checking account. I mean in a high-yield savings account or money market fund at 4.5 to 5.2% APY. Right now, you can get those rates at Alley, Marcus by Goldman Sachs, or through Treasury bills. That's real money protecting your liquidity position. This isn't about returns. This is about making sure you never have to liquidate your investment portfolio or take a cash advance on your American Express Platinum when life happens. And life always happens, especially when you're scaling a business or between executive roles. Third, then invest in tax-advantaged accounts like a Roth IRA and HSA. For 2026, that's $7,000 per year for the Roth, or $8,000 if you're over 50. The Roth IRA is one of the greatest wealth-building tools in the American tax code. Your money grows tax-free. You pull it out in retirement tax-free. Over 30 years, we're talking about potentially $600,000 to $900,000 that you'll never pay capital gains taxes on. That's real wealth preservation that private banking clients pay millions for through complex trust structures. Only after you've done all of that should you even think about making extra student loan payments. And even then, I'd argue you should keep investing instead in taxable brokerage accounts, allocating to VTI, VX, US, and private REITs. I've had entrepreneurs on Shark Tank tell me they can't invest in their own companies because they're drowning in student loan payments. When I dig into the numbers, they're making double and triple payments trying to be responsible. Meanwhile, their e-commerce brand or SaaS startup could be generating 20%, 30%, 50% 50% returns on invested capital if they just had the liquidity to invest in inventory, paid ads, or engineering talent. This is financial insanity. You have to understand the opportunity cost of every dollar you spend. That's what separates millionaires from the middle class in the wealth building game. Every dollar has a job, and its job is to earn more dollars. If you deploy it to a 5% liability when you have access to 10% assets, you're voluntarily choosing to be poorer. And let me add one more thing. Federal student loans have protections that other debts don't have, income-driven repayment plans, potential forgiveness programs for public service deferment, and forbearance options if you hit hard times or want to go back for an executive MBA. When you aggressively pay them down, you're not just losing investment returns, you're potentially throwing away flexibility and even six-figure forgiveness opportunities. Stop it. Make the minimum payments, invest the difference, build real wealth. Think about it like this. Would you rather have $250,000 in student loan debt at 5% and a $1.1 million investment portfolio, or $0 in student loans and $0 in investments? The first scenario has a net worth of $850,000 and cash flow from dividends. The second has a net worth of $0. The wealthy choose assets over liabilities every single time. They understand that cheap fixed-rate government-backed debt is a tool. You can refinance a car, you can sell a house, but you cannot go back in time and invest your 25-year-old dollars. That window closes. The executives I advise at family offices don't fear student loans. They fear missing compounding years. They fear not maxing their backdoor Roth IRA. They fear not having the capital to buy distressed real estate when the market dips or to invest in the next Series A round of a unicorn startup. That's the difference between building wealth and just getting by with a paid-off degree. Focus on building assets, generating passive income, and using cheap debt strategically. That's the path to real financial freedom, to the vacation home in Aspen, to the collectible car portfolio, to never checking your bank balance again. Third point, and this one surprises a lot of high-income professionals who are taught to hate car payments, stop throwing extra money at low-interest auto loans. Now, before you send me angry comments about being financially irresponsible, let me explain exactly what I mean and why the mathematics supports this completely for anyone managing a six-figure salary or seven-figure net worth. If you financed a luxury vehicle, a daily driver, or even a fleet vehicle for your business at 1.9%, 2.9%, even 4.5% APR, you have cheap money. That dealership, credit union, or private bank, like Bank of America, private bank, or Porsche Financial Services, gave you access to institutional capital at rates that are below historical inflation and well below T. Risk-free rate. In real terms, after you factor in tax deductions, if it's a business vehicle, you're practically borrowing for free. So why on earth would you rush to pay that off when that same capital could be working for you in the market? I'm going to tell you the truth. The reason people want to pay off car loans fast is emotional, not logical. They don't like the feeling of having a payment on their BMW M5, their Cadillac Escalade, or their Mercedes G-Wagon. They want to own the car outright so they can tell people they have no debt. I understand the psychology, but psychology doesn't build wealth. Mathematics builds wealth, and the ultra-wealthy know it. Here's what I do across my personal balance sheet and inside the holding companies I control. When I finance anything at a low interest rate, whether it's a Range Rover autobiography for my wife, a Tesla Model X Plaid, or a classic Ferrari F355 for the collection, I take the longest term available and make minimum payments every single time. And I take the money I could have used for a larger down payment or extra monthly payments, and I put it to work in cash flowing assets. Let me give you a real example with numbers that matter to accredited investors. Say you have an $85,000 loan on a Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT at 3.25% interest over 6 years. Your payment is around $1,295 a month. Now, some people would try to pay an extra $700 a month to knock it out in 3 years because they hate debt. Over the life of that accelerated plan that extra $700 a month totals $25,200. You've thrown it at 3.25% liability. But if you invested that $700 a month instead into a diversified portfolio, let's say 60% VOE, 20% SGD, 10% VNQ for real estate exposure, and 10, after 6 years, you'd have roughly $65,800. You made an extra $40,600 compared to paying off the car early. And here's the kicker. After the car loan is done in year 6, you still have that investment account compounding. The person who paid off the car early has nothing but a depreciating asset that's now worth $42,000 on the used market. This is non-negotiable in my financial philosophy and in the playbook of every family office I've worked with. Cheap debt is not your enemy. Cheap debt is your friend when you understand how to use it to acquire appreciating assets or income-producing securities. Now, I want to be crystal clear about something because nuance matters when we're talking about capital allocation. I'm talking about low-interest auto loans on vehicles you can actually afford. If you're financing a car at 9%, 12%, 18% because you have subprime credit or you went to a buy here, pay here lot, that's a completely different situation. That's expensive debt, and you need to either pay it down aggressively or refinance it through Lightstream, PenFed, or a credit union as soon as possible. I'm also not telling you to go buy a Lamborghini Revuelto you can't afford just because the rate is 4%. The car payment should fit comfortably within your budget, ideally under 10% of your gross monthly income. I'm talking about the strategic decision of whether to pay off cheap asset-backed debt early versus deploying capital elsewhere. Here's the action step for high earners. Look at your auto loan interest rate today on your Audi, Lexus, or pickup truck. If it's under 5.5%, make minimum payments only. Take whatever extra you are planning to pay and set up an automatic investment into a brokerage account at Fidelity, Schwab, or Vanguard. I recommend broad market index funds like VOD, VOD, or QQQ, plus dividend ETFs like SGD and DGRO, something with low fees that tracks the overall market or pays consistent cash flow. Don't touch it, let it compound, automated so you nay. Verse you the money and aren't tempted to spend it on bottle service or another watch. And let me address the people who say, but what if the market crashes right after I invest instead of paying the car? Here's what I say to that, and this is what institutional money managers say to their clients. Over any 20-year rolling period in history, the S&P 500 has always gone up, always. Short-term volatility is noise. Long-term investing in productive assets is the signal. If you're investing money you don't need for 5, 10, 20 years, stop worrying about crashes and start worrying about the opportunity cost of not being invested. The wealthy don't fear cheap debt. They use it strategically to maintain liquidity for opportunities, like buying real estate when rates spike and sellers get desperate, or getting allocation in a hot IPO, or acquiring more shares of Microsoft and Apple on a 15% dip. That's the difference between building wealth and just getting by with a paid-off Honda. All right, now let me tell you exactly what you should be doing with all this money you're freeing up, because this is where real wealth gets built and where advertisers in the banking, fintech, and investment sectors spend the most money to reach you. Listen to me carefully. The money you were wasting on extra debt payments toward cheap liabilities needs to go into assets that generate returns or appreciate. Period. Here's my exact hierarchy for where your cash flow should flow, and this is the same waterfall I teach to executives and entrepreneurs I mentor. First, and this is absolutely critical, take every dollar of employer 401k match available to you. If your employer at Salesforce, Goldman Sachs, or Pfizer matches 100% up to 6% of your $350,000 salary, you contribute at least 6%. This is $21,000 from you, $21,000 from them. This is an instant 100% return on your investment. I don't care if you have credit card debt, student loans, or a mortgage. You take the match first. Anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't understand basic arithmetic and shouldn't be managing money. Second, build your EAM. Regency Fund. I want you to have 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a high-yield savings account, money market fund, or short-term treasury ladder. Right now, you can get 4.7 to 5.3% on savings accounts at CIT Bank, SoFi, or through T-bills. That's real money, and it's FDIC insured or backed by the US government. This isn't about returns. This is about protection. This is about making sure you never have to go into high interest debt or sell your Apple stock when life happens. A medical event, a business opportunity, a recession. And life always happens, especially when you're playing at a high level. Third, max out your Roth IRA if you're eligible and use the backdoor Roth IRA strategy. If your income is too high for 2026, that's $7,000 per year or $8,000 if you're over 50. The Roth IRA is one of the greatest wealth building tools in the American tax code. Your money grows tax-free. You pull it out in retirement tax-free. Over 30 years of max contributions and 9% growth. We're talking about potentially $1.1 million that you'll never pay taxes on. That's real wealth preservation that private banks charge 1% AUM fees to replicate with complex trusts. Fourth, if you've maxed your match and your Roth, go back and max out your 401k. The limit for 2026 is $23,500 or $31,000 if you're 50 plus. Every dollar you put in reduces your taxable income today if you use traditional and gross tax deferred until retirement. That's a tax arbitrage that saves high earners $8,000 to $12,000 per year in federal taxes alone. Fifth, and this is where I personally focus a lot of my energy and where my net worth compounds fastest, invest in dividend paying stocks, ETFs, and real estate syndications. I want assets that pay me every single month or every single quarter. I want cash flow. Dividends and rental income are beautiful because they come whether the market is up or down. C, your real dollars hitting your account that you can reinvest to buy more shares of JP Morgan, Realty Income, or SJD. In my own portfolio, I focus heavily on dividend aristocrats, companies that have raised their dividends for 25 years or more. Names like Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Chevron. These are businesses that have survived recessions, depressions, wars, pandemics, supply chain crises. They keep paying and raising dividends through it all. I also use dividend ETFs like SGD, VIM, and DGRO. These give you instant diversification across dozens or hundreds of dividend-paying companies, lower risk, steady income, long-term growth, and they're perfect for DRIP, dividend reinvestment plans that buy more shares automatically. Here's the bottom line. Every dollar you are wasting on extra payments toward cheap, tax-advantaged debt could be working for you, could be generating passive income, could be buying equity in the best companies in the world, could be compounding into serious wealth that buys you freedom, options, and the ability to walk away from anything. When you understand this shift from debt elimination to asset accumulation, everything changes. I've been doing this for decades. This is how I built my wealth, not by paying off cheap debt as fast as possible, but by strategically deploying capital where it generates the highest risk-adjusted returns. And now you know exactly how to do it too. And finally, I've told you which low-cost liabilities to stop overpaying, but now let me tell you about the debt that is absolutely destroying your financial future and your credit profile. The debt you must eliminate with extreme prejudice because it's kryptonite to wealth building. I'm talking about high-interest consumer debt, credit cards at 22.9, 9% APR, personal loans from fintech lenders, buy now, pay later schemes on luxury goods payday, loans, cash advances from Your American Express or Chase Sapphire Reserve. This is the debt that will keep you poor forever if you don't kill it, and it's the exact opposite of the strategic leverage we discussed with mortgages and auto loans. Let me be crystal clear. Everything I said in the first 3 points about minimum payments and investing the difference, it doesn't apply if you're carrying a revolving balance on a credit card at 24% interest. That's not cheap debt. That's not leverage. That's financial cancer, and it will metastasize through your entire balance sheet if you don't cut it out immediately with surgical precision. Here's the deal, and this is pure arithmetic that every hedge fund analyst and private banker understands. When you're paying 20%, 25%, 29% interest on credit card debt or unsecured personal loans, there is no investment on the planet that can reliably beat that return. None. The S&P 500 averages 10%. Commercial real estate might get you 8% to 12% IRR. Private equity might target 15% to 20%. Even the best investors in the world, Warren Buffett, Ken Griffin, the top quant funds at Renaissance Technologies, they're not consistently generating 25% risk-free returns year after year. So when you pay off a 25% credit card, you're effectively earning a guaranteed 25% return on that money, guaranteed, risk-free, tax-free. There's nothing else like it in the financial world, and ignoring it is like setting your wallet on fire and then complaining you're cold. I've seen this destroy people with $500,000 incomes. I've had entrepreneurs on Shark Tank, founders with brilliant SaaS products and e-commerce brands doing $10 million in revenue, come on the show. And when I look at their personal finances during due diligence, they're drowning in credit card debt. $45,000 on an Amex, $30,000 on a Chase card, $60,000 in personal loans they took to fund Dividend. Tory, and they're making minimum payments while the interest compounds against them every single month. They can never get ahead because they're fighting a battle they mathematically cannot win. The interest is accruing faster than their business can grow, and it strangles cash flow. Here's my strategy for eliminating high interest debt. And I want you to follow this exactly, because this is what I implement with executives and business owners who come to me with broken balance sheets. First, list every high interest liability you have. Credit cards, personal loans, lines of credit, anything above 8% interest. Write down the balance, the interest rate, the minimum payment, and the credit limit. Get it all on one spreadsheet or in a wealth dashboard like Kubera or Monarch Money. You can't fix what you don't measure. Second, attack the highest interest rate first. I don't care about the balance. Some people say pay off the smallest balance first for psychological wins, the debt snowball method. I say that's nonsense for high earners. Mathematics doesn't care about your psychology. Your net worth doesn't care about your feelings. You pay off the highest rate first because that's what costs you the most money per dollar of debt. This is called the avalanche method, and it will save you the most money over time, period. Third, throw every available dollar at that highest rate debt while making minimums on everything else. Cancel subscriptions you don't need. Pause the country club membership for 6 months. Sell the third car, the weekend Porsche 911, or the Range Rover that sits in the garage. Pick up consulting work. Liquidate non-retirement brokerage positions if you have to. I don't care how you do it. Find the money and destroy that debt. If you have $80,000 in credit card debt at 24%, you are paying $19,200 a year in interest. That's $1,600 a month, literally evap. O rating. That could be a down payment on a rental property every 4 months. That could max your 401k, Roth IRA, and HSA with money left over. Fourth, once the highest rate debt is gone, roll that entire payment into the next highest rate. If you were paying $2,500 a month to kill the 29% APR card, now you pay $2,500 plus the minimum to the 22% APR card. This accelerates the avalanche. Fifth, once all your high interest debt is eliminated, never go back. Cut up the cards if you have to. Switch to a debit card or charge card like the Amex Platinum that requires full payment monthly. Do whatever it takes to never carry a credit card balance again. Use credit cards as tools for points, for travel benefits, for purchase protection on your Rolex or your new MacBook Pro, but pay them to zero every single statement. Now, I want to address something important because nuance matters when you're dealing with seven-figure strategies. Some people hear my earlier points about not overpaying cheap debt and they use it as an excuse to not pay off expensive debt. That's not what I'm saying, and that's how you stay broke. I'm telling you to be strategic and ruthless. Low interest debt below 5.5% on appreciating or cash flowing assets, minimum payments, invest the difference in VOSGD, real estate, or your business. High interest debt above 8%, scorched earth, Destroy it as fast as humanly possible because it's a wealth emergency. This is the nuance that most financial advice from mass market blogs misses. Not all debt is the same. The interest rate, the tax treatment, and the collateral determine everything. Once you understand this principle, you can make intelligent, millionaire-level decisions about where your money goes. And here's something I want you to remember because it reframes your entire financial identity. Being debt-free isn't the goal. Being wealthy is the goal. Some of the wealthiest people I know carry debt, but a strategic, low-interest, tax-deductible debt that costs less than the returns they're generating on their investments. They have a $3 million mortgage at 3% on a property worth $6 million that cash flows $15,000 per month. They have a $150,000 loan at 2.9% on a Ferrari that they drive to client meetings to close deals. Meanwhile, some of the most broke people I know are technically debt-free but have zero assets, zero investments, zero passive income, and they drive a 2008 Toyota. Don't confuse being debt-free with being wealthy. They're not the same thing, and confusing them will cost you millions. Focus on building assets, generating income, and using debt strategically. That's the path to real financial freedom. The kind where you can walk into a dealership and write a check for a Mercedes Maybach, or buy a vacation rental in cash in Scottsdale, or take 6 months off to travel while your dividend portfolio pays your bills. So there you have it. My complete blueprint for strategic debt management that most retail financial advisors will never tell you because they're trained to sell you mutual funds, not to teach you capital allocation. Let me recap the 5 critical points we covered today so you can implement this starting this afternoon. Number 1, stop aggressively paying down low-interest mortgage debt. If your rate is under 5.5% on your primary residence or investment property, make minimum payments and invest the difference in broad market index funds, dividend ETFs, or real estate syndications. Your money works harder in the market than it does paying down cheap tax-advantaged debt. Number 2, stop overpay federal student loans. Make minimum payments. Protect your credit score and redirect capital to your 401k match, Roth IRA, HSA, and taxable brokerage accounts. Time in the market beats a 5% payoff every time. Number 3, stop throwing extra money at low-interest auto loans on your Tesla, BMW, or pickup truck. If it's under 5.5%, let the bank hold the risk while you deploy your cash into assets that appreciate and compound. Number 4, redirect all that freed up cash flow into assets that generate returns. Max the 401k match first. It's free money. Build a 6-month emergency fund in a 5% high yield account. Max your Roth IRA and HSA. Then dump everything else into VODO, VTI, SGD, DGRO, VNQ, and individual blue chip stocks like Apple, Microsoft, and JP Morgan. Use DRIP to reinvest dividends and let compound interest do the heavy lifting. Number 5, annihilate high-interest consumer debt with extreme prejudice. Use the avalanche method, cut expenses, increase income, and get it to zero. Never carry a balance again. When you execute this framework, you stop playing defense with your money and you start playing offense. You stop being the person who brags about having no debt. And you start being the person with a $2 million investment portfolio, $300,000 a year in passive income, and the liquidity to buy assets when everyone else is panicking. That's how you build generational wealth. That's how you afford the car collection, the real estate, the freedom. And now you have the exact playbook. Go execute.